Temba Nolutshungu this morning.
Thanks, Ayan. I feel much better addressing you at this level and much more relaxed, very much closer to you, if that's going to be okay. Am I clearly visible to everyone? And am I also audible? Remember, I speak in low tones, soft tones and so on, which some people have said, oh, that sounds quite romantic or something like that. I'm not sure whether that's a compliment or not. Whatever. Oh, no, yeah, that's when I'll be getting to the slides. That's going to be fine indeed. I'd like to share with you the background to the Khaya project by focusing primarily on the 1913 Natives Land Act. And so you can appreciate the importance and significance of the Khaya My Home property titling project. The project is the brainchild of Leon Law. It took him quite a while for him to get us around the project, and when we really comprehended its significance, we decided to move on. So in a way, my presentation is a tribute to the Chief Executive of the Free Market Foundation, Leon Law, over there, and also all the people who are involved, and like Mr. Khaya himself, that is Perry Feldman. He's such a hard worker, an incredible person. Anyway, the 1913 Natives Land Act, before its enactment, there were people like Saul Plaatje, who was then the secretary of the South African Natives Land Act, the precursor to the ANC as we know it today. And he was part of that broad movement of people who were opposed to the act, because they knew in terms of what was being contemplated, it would spell disaster in terms of the socio-economic and political fortunes of black people, natives, the native people, the native sector of the South African population. So when the bill was passed, Saul Plaatje had the following words to say, and I quote him, I hope my memory will serve me well, and I quote him: "Awaking on Friday morning, 20 June 1913, the South African native found himself not actually a slave in his native country, but a pariah in his country of birth, but a pariah in his country of birth." That was Saul Plaatje. Say I may have paraphrased him a bit here. But you can imagine these words were uttered in agony. In agony. There was also another Mr. Dambuzo who was opposed to the enactment of the Natives Land Act. One of the words that he had uttered was, "There is winter in this legislation. In winter, the trees are stripped and they lose their leaves." Poetic words, pregnant with meaning in terms of what was being foreseen, what was going to just descend on black people. And so the Natives Land Act had been motivated on the basis that the labor of the native sector of the population at the time, meaning the blacks, their labor was needed in the agricultural sector and the burgeoning mining industry. And so the act, at the end of the day, it just simply resulted in the socio-economic emasculation of black people. And overnight, black people did not have any property. All the property had been confiscated. And now some people have asked me at times as to how, in practical terms, the Natives Land Act had been enforced, had been implemented at the level of how it had impacted on actual people. And so I want to share with you one or two cases here that come out of this wonderful book by Saul T. Plaatje, which is titled Native Life in South Africa. And he says, okay, there is more light here. Yeah. He cites one example, straight out of the book, One example of these experiences was that of a white farmer who had induced a thrifty native in another district to come and farm on his estate. The contract was duly executed about the end of May 1913. It was agreed that the native should move over to the new place after gathering his crops and sharing them with his old landlord, which he did in the third week in June. On his arrival, however, the new landlord's attitude towards him aroused his suspicion. His suspicions were confirmed when, after some hesitation, the landlord told him that their contract was illegal. Having already left his old place, the legal only source was to leave that place and wander about with his stock and family. They went in the direction of Kronstadt, and they have not been heard of since. You can speculate as to what happened to them eventually. Maybe the guy committed suicide or something like that. Then, this is another case. It's going to be the last case, and then I'm going to move on. In the same book, on 31 January 1914, the magistrate of Ladysmith, presumably acting under instructions from one of General Botha's departments, issued the following notice to 79 native families in his district. I quote, "To Willem Sibisi, Krolhead residing on one of the following farms, namely remainder of Brakfontein, remainder of Weltervrede, etc. Take notice, in terms of Section 4 of Law 41 and so on, that you are required to remove with your kraal and inmates from whichever of the said farms you may be residing on. 6 months from this date, the aforementioned farms having all been purchased by government for closer settlement purposes." It was hard times. There is another case of a man who was registered as 119 years old, who was evicted, together with his wife and his family. So I'm sharing these experiences. There are so many that are recorded in that book for us to understand how painful it was at that time. And so what had happened to black people as a result of the Natives Land Act was that they became hewers of wood and drawers of water overnight. So they had no property whatsoever. So I can cite one case, for example, that of my grandfather, who was one of the victims. He had come to Johannesburg and had built his own house on the grounds that were owned by the Crown Mines Gold Company, Crown Mines Gold Mining Company in Johannesburg. He had built his house, had built a tennis court that was the envy of many, many other tennis court owners throughout that area. And it was used by whites, by people of all races. When he died, they said, everybody goes out now. So the family was dispersed throughout the Gauteng area, Transvaal at the time. No compensation whatsoever, no compensation, despite the fact that it has come to light now, I've come to know about this, that the mining company, Crown Mines Mining Company, had offered him the property in terms of offering a title deed, wanted to give him a title deed that was denied. The door had been closed to that because of the Natives Land Act. And so that's what happened to him. Now, the Natives Land Act left a trail of destruction, as I've shared with you, and pain and agony for generations, And when we, as the Free Market Foundation, sat down, and with Leon actually motivating us to focus on the conceptualizing the Khaya project, we thought of the pain, we thought about all these experiences. And we somehow got to a point where we understood the importance of the Khaya project, that it would not only be a catalyst for economic self-empowerment, I will elaborate on that, but that it would start to address the pain that had been felt for generations as a result of the Natives Land Act and also the Land Grey Act of 1894. And so we sat around the table and discussed this. And the idea was that we would bring about a situation that would result in people having title deeds at the end of the day. And so with this in mind, what we did was we went to the private sector, that is businesses and individuals, and we told them about the property titling project. And we elaborate as to how it was important and how it would result in a situation where the properties, the houses that people for generations had been occupying as tenants, which were owned by the government, how they would be liberated from government, and that the people would start taking ownership of those properties. And then the important thing about the Khaya project, as we were applying our minds to it, was that as Hernando de Soto has explained in his book, The Mystery of Capital, it dawned upon us. We realized and we knew, because we had studied the book, that if any property that is occupied or that might be in a way claimed to be owned, if it is not legally registered in terms of a freehold title deed, unencumbered freehold title deed, it would be meaningless in terms of economic significance, in terms of actually being owned by the person themselves. And so we decided to rectify that. Now Hernando de Soto says such property that is not legally registered is dead capital. It has no economic significance whatsoever. And that at the stroke of a pen, if it becomes title property legally, then it becomes active capital. Then it becomes an economic asset. Then it becomes part of the economy. That's the good thing. This is the wonderful thing about the project, the Khaya project. And so we have seen this being revealed where we started out with the pilot project in Guate, that is in the Parys municipality in the Free State province. And we saw there how people occupying the same house, that when they got this thing that is precious thing that is known as a title deed, the mindset changed. The mindset changed because the thing is, and again, the logic of ownership of property is that, especially a home, is that you want to see the value being enhanced. You want to see the value appreciating. That's what you want to, that's the logic of ownership of property. It's like this driving force that says, look, make some improvements to the house, because that's going to translate into, into an enhancement of value of the property. It's going to be good for you. And so what we've seen happening is that we found in some cases that people would knock down one wall of the existing house and then add an extra room. And in some cases, they would demolish the entire structure and start from the beginning by going down and digging up the foundation. And then in the process, there would be a wall coming up. And in the process, what happens? So it's the bricklayers who are employed. So it is the plasterers who are employed. And so it is the carpenters who are employed to fix the doors, to make the doors. So it is the plumbers who are employed. So in some cases, it is a draftsman who draws up the plan who is employed. And so it happens. And these people bring along with them labor. In some cases, these would be people who would not have any artisanal skills, and sometimes no skills whatsoever. And there would be skills transfers taking place in the process. It's an amazing thing that happens, that occurs without government involvement. No government involvement whatsoever. It's a process of real economic self-empowerment that is catalyzed by only one act, and that is the people, at the end of the day, having this thing that is known as a title deed. It's a wonderful project. And so the things, when the improvements are made to their house, it's taken some period of time, in some cases a couple of years, but at the end of the day, when it is finished, because it's been done on a cash basis, there is nothing that is owed in terms of that house, maybe having a loan being accessed from the bank, nothing. So there is this hard economic asset that's part of the economy. There's a spin-off to this scenario, and that is, when you own property, I don't think you would go about destroying other people's properties. I don't think you would do that. I don't think you would be part of these autocratic tendencies where you have mobs unleashed and they go about destroying other people's properties, because you'd have empathy for people who also own property. And so you would find in cases, in locations, in townships, where quite a significant number of houses have title deeds, that there is relative stability. So you don't have that many cases of civil unrest in terms of people destroying other people's properties. This is the good thing about this project. Now, with Khaya, it also has a demonstration effect. That demonstration effect is that with adjoining areas, for example, people observing what has happened in other areas in terms of their being recipients of title deeds, they also would like to have their title deeds. And so even with areas, this is going to answer the question that was raised yesterday, in areas that are on the periphery of territories that fall within the jurisdiction of traditional leadership, there is pressure from within, from below, that the people in those areas, they say, we also want title deeds, like in the other townships that fall outside of the scope of traditional rule. They also are starting to say, we want title deeds. It's going to be a matter of time when there will be this silent revolution that will be so dispersed throughout the country, where there will be pressure on those people who are impeding this whole process of people accessing title deeds. I feel very strongly about that. And what I want to do in this video is that I want to share with you, that's a threat from our chairman. And I'm going to share with you, first of all, how we've gone around in terms of pursuing our work, being focused on the Khaya project itself. Remember Khaya, that's my home. That's a property titling project. And then also you will see how the Free Market Foundation pursues its advocacy endeavors. This will answer the question that was raised by the gentleman, what are you going to do from now on with regards to the EWC? And so this is going to highlight also to some extent how we go about pursuing our work. And so at that point, let me just share with you some of the slides here. And hopefully there might be something like 2 or 3 minutes for you to raise any questions or comments or whatever. And I'm looking for this instrument here. Why do I have this slide? That's a cat. As you can see, it tells a story. It says something. This is an ambitious cat. Wants to be a lion and will be a lion. And so one of the things that really, really depresses me and frustrates me is that when I interact with policymakers and governments at all levels, when we, all of us, interact with them, is that members of parliament and policymakers tend to undermine people. And they think like, oh, well, we have to take care of the people, because they cannot really, on their own endeavors, rise to the level where they can realize their socio-economic ambitions. They think, no, we, the government, the boutique government, the paternalistic government, we are the ones who need to take care of the people. And with that, there is an element of arrogance, of undermining, especially black people. It is as if, they will squander, they will sell the title deeds just to everyone and so on and drink up the money in the shipping. That is what I keep encountering all the time. I'm not saying that's a general sentiment within government, personnel at various tiers of government, but I do encounter it from time to time, and it pains me because it does not recognize the fact that there are all these wonderful people who, by their own endeavors, are able to get from nowhere to get to somewhere, and they just carry on, and this is something that has to be appreciated, but still it's taken quite a while for the government to actually really understand it and translate the idea into action. We hope that one day, sooner rather than later, that the government will make an announcement and actually say, all those who are officially registered tenants, occupying the houses that are owned by government at all tiers of government, from this day onwards, they are getting title deeds. Please queue up on these days and to receive the title deeds. Very easy. It's very easy. It just requires political commitment and also understanding the importance of this measure. How it would be a catalyst for people taking care of their own destiny. Now, if you look at a township like Tamohole, which was the first pilot project, and in other areas, all this economic activity that takes place, it actually is a de facto free market scenario. There is no minimum wage law, minimum wage regulations. Nothing is regulated whatsoever. And there is voluntary exchange. And there is personal choice in terms of, say, who are you going to choose to build, or whatever the case, and without any interference by government. And all these economic transactions take place without any force or fraud. So if you leave people to their devices, and this is the model, they will achieve the most wonderful things. This is a microcosm of a free market. So expand that so that this becomes the situation throughout the country. And then we will see ourselves totally rising above the challenges that confront us in this country. Now, getting back to the slides. And so, there it is. These are the people who the government looks down upon. Oh, well, we have to help them, kind of thing. And they come up with all these welfarist programs. And they boast about the long queues of welfare grants and recipients of welfare grants and so on, which for me should be something that's an embarrassment. But anyway, here are the people I was talking about. This goes back during the constitution drafting process. You can recognize that Cyril Ramaphosa. Leon and I had a meeting with him and had impressed on him and persuaded him to seriously consider incorporating the property rights clause in the Constitution. And lo and behold, we had a property rights clause being incorporated in the Constitution. We interacted with everybody. This is Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, the head of the IFP at that time, and still is the head of the IFP. We interacted with him around that time during the constitution drafting process. And so in pursuit of our political endeavors, we interact with everybody within Parliament on a focused basis. Now this is something about Khaya. This is a before and after picture. So before and after picture. There's the picture before Khaya kicked in. And look at what has happened. No government subsidies whatsoever. It's amazing. And we're not talking about middle-class people. We're talking about ordinary people achieving extraordinary things. That's what we're talking about. Ordinary people achieving extraordinary things. Here's another one, before and after. It tells a story, right? And this is what happened 1 year later. This is what has happened. No government subsidies. Again, I need to keep on adding that, because sometimes when people see some cases of where there's been improvement, people tend to think, well, the government has something to do with it. Before and after. Look at that. This is wonderful. And these are some of the recipients of of the Khaya title deed. That title deed that's been expedited by the Khaya project. This Mrs. Chabalala and the daughters. These are the recipients of the title deeds. What happens is that at times the event, our efforts culminate in a ceremonial handing over of the title deeds. So we have all those people who are recipients and all those people who've been sponsoring them, sometimes on a one-on-one basis. Sometimes it's companies that sponsor certain units, certain numbers of units, and these people are happy. I challenge, and I put out this challenge to the EFF. I said, you want to nationalize properties? You want people not to have title deeds? Come to this ceremony and say those people must hand over the title deeds. You, when you're government, you are going to be in charge of the houses, you own the houses, and you will have a revolution on your hands. I've invited them. I still have to see them coming. I don't think they will. We spread all over the country. All over the country. We spread the tentacles. We interact with everybody, especially at local government level. And Terry Markman is the person who does that kind of work. And so we have to date registered title deeds to 2,323, with still lots more that are in the pipeline, thanks to the sponsorship by businesses and also individuals on an individual personal basis who sometimes sponsor 1 unit, 2, 3 units. There is one case where one person privately sponsors units on a monthly basis. So every month somebody gets a title deed by virtue of that person's sponsorship. Where do I end this? Anyway, that song and dance sort of story was when we met with the leadership of the IFP at their headquarters, like we meet with all the party hierarchies or wherever we might find them. We have yet to be in Luthuli House, but we interact with everybody. And the occasion was that we had said to the IFP, all those municipalities that fall within your jurisdiction, where you hold sway, we would like to have them sponsored in terms of title deeds of people living in those areas. And there was great excitement, great excitement. So that's the Khaya project. And so that is how we operate. That's our modus operandi in terms of how we embark on advocacy initiatives to try to bring sense to the government, especially in terms now of the prevalent challenge, which is the EWC story. And so we don't take leave around December, November. We don't. We take leave during the year, sometimes at awkward times. The only times that we become sort of like humans, like everybody else, and we celebrate, say, Christmas or New Year or whatever, that's the time that we really feel, oh, by the way, we're just human like everybody else. That does not imply that we're superhuman, but the point is we will be working right throughout the festive season, and we will interact with various identified, politicians or members of parliament, primarily focused on the EWC story. That is who we are. Ladies and gentlemen, on that note, my session ends off. If you might want to ask 1 or 2 questions, for whatever reason, that depends on the person chairing this session, the moderator. Thank you very much.